Ready for your next chapter of growth in business? This episode, Justin Lund breaks down how and the identity shifts needed to make it happen. Stay tuned to find out exactly what it takes.
I went from being proud of myself of bringing in a couple $100,000 a year to literally inside of 12 months bringing in $2, $3, $4, $5 million of profit a month. You know that saying, if you're not growing, you're dying? There's an order and a sequence to delegating, and that's what a lot of us get wrong. And I stayed so busy over here, I turned it into a $100 million company that was stolen from me. All the money was gone.
That's a tough lesson.
It's an expensive one, that's for sure. If you feel like you can't leave, these are all very strong indicators that you're building a business that is ultimately going to be a prison.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to The Business Game.
A podcast that moves the needle.
Hello and welcome to The Business Game, a podcast that moves the needle. I'm Steve Plummer. Before we get started today, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you're listening. Today we're joined by Justin Lund, CEO of Propel. Hi Justin, how are you going? And a warm welcome to you.
Hi, thanks for having me, Steve.
A pleasure. All right, tell us a bit about yourself and about what Propel does.
Sure. So I've been kind of a serial entrepreneur for going on over 20 years now. I've had a lot of different stints that I've been involved in, from a marketing agency to an affiliate company to an affiliate network. And I've seen had my share of success and challenges. And this most recent company, Propel, kind of came about as a result of, it was a bit of an accident, actually. I was in the midst of some litigation with some business partners from a previous operation. And as a result, I had a bunch of professionals around me, the accountants, lawyers, different people like that working through that process. And a friend called to ask if I would help them set up an entity and then just help them with like the QuickBooks and just kind of the red tape part of business. And it wasn't something that I was interested in, or there was nothing that I was doing for anybody, but we helped her. And she just thought it was great because she could have the good side of business without dealing with all the stuff she didn't like in business. And she told a few of her friends and they called and said, could you help me too? Within a year, we had 50 clients and it was really kind of a fun, remarkable, accidental way to get into what I do more of now, which is coaching. My job, I'm not an accountant or I'm not that smart. I don't deal with all that stuff. But I would work with the founders on some of their beliefs and some of their thoughts and some of the mistakes they were making about approaching things from a limited mindset. And I got a good lift out of that. It was fun to talk to people and help them go from like this level that they would be stuck at or used to for the last 2 or 3 years and have them just break out of it and do 200% more over the next year because they just changed how they look at things. So part of it was helping take some of the red tape off their plate. And the other part was helping them shift how they were viewing the things they were doing in their business. So it was really fun.
Wow, I love that. It's almost the accidental millionaire kind of phenomenon, where you've jumped into it. All right, Justin, you've built your methodology from, I guess, almost real-world challenge, even failure, and spectacular recovery. So I'm really curious, what was the moment you realized your business, your life, couldn't continue the way it was? And how did that trigger the foundations for the freedom flywheel that your business runs on now?
Yeah, I think I know for sure the beginnings of this started when I was still kind of a solopreneur many years ago. This is over about 20 years ago now. I'd been working for a couple of years on my own, and I had some contractors and other people outside of, but no employees at the time. And I had come from a chapter in my life that was kind of a dark and I'd rebuilt from some adversity in my personal life through addiction and trying to rebuild my family and restore my marriage and things like that. And so I was really, I had a chip on my shoulder to prove that I could be a contributing member of society and my family. And I was doing okay. I was bringing in 6 figures. I was feeling good about it, but I I was working 7 days every single week. And some of those days, as much as 20 hours in a day. Not every day, but there were some days that I would actually wake up with my face on the keyboard because I was just going until I was, kind of conked out. And so I thought, okay, I've paid off some debts. I've kind of I've established that I have a little bit of credibility again. I'm doing some of the things that I've really set out to sort of prove that I could do. Maybe I'll dial it back a little bit. And I began thinking, I was doing some calculations, thinking, if I could make $200,000 and dial back my time a little, that's good. And I was kind of proud of myself and thinking that was going to be a great lifestyle for us. But my clients didn't like that idea. They didn't want to see less of me. They wanted more from me. They wanted to continue to experience growth. And I was like, I'm going to taper it back a few hours. And so I realized that I truly, that saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. Like I felt, they told me with no uncertain terms, if you don't grow with us, you're done. Like we're out. So I knew I needed to grow, and I knew I couldn't give more time physically. Like I couldn't. So I started thinking, like, how can I do this better? And luckily I was able to find some people to help get some mentoring and some coaching and learning things. I found people that were kind of like up that mountain journey further ahead of me, and I grabbed onto some of their coattails and I tapped them on the shoulder, and I started getting things like that. And that's where those concepts begin to kind of take shape, is learning from others further along in the path than I was, of how could I continue to grow, but yet I wanted less time. I wanted less responsibility. I had 2 kids at the time, little kids. And, our third may have been on the way right about then. And so I knew I needed to spend less time at work, not more. But I also needed to grow revenues and needed to grow our clients' revenues and needed to perform and produce more. And I was like, how do I do less and get more? It was not because I wanted more. It was because I really felt like I was compelled in this situation where my business would, after a couple of good years, maybe start to decline and be shut down, or I'd need to figure something out that didn't mathematically really seem possible, Steve. It was like, do less to get more? How does it? That doesn't make sense.
Especially in the entrepreneurial world, right? You go, 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 go. What do you mean I've got to take a step back and do less? What? How's that going to work? Yep. So it sounds like,
totally.
It sounds like you were very much suffering from that founder syndrome. That
100%. Yep. Yep. That's exactly. So I knew I had to figure something for me, my clients, my family. And I think it was, honestly, I think it's the grace of God. I was able to find people that, rather than just try to do more. And I guess I had already tried to do more, so there was no gas in the tank, so to speak. And I had to find a different way. So I just kept looking for different answers.
Mm-hmm. So can we unpack the freedom flywheel just a little bit so people know what we're talking about and why it's effective even?
Yeah, you bet. So I when I reached this point that I just described, I had hit a ceiling, and I've called that a capacity ceiling. And I think all founders go through levels of this. They hit a ceiling at some point, and it could be their capacity and skill. It could be time. It could be, there's a lot of things that kind of that we bump our head up against that we can't pass through quickly and easily. And that's where I started to figure out there has to be like an exponential factor, because you can't just hustle more. You can't. Everybody only has 24 hours in a day. That is the one equalizing factor across all time zones and everything, right? We just have the same amount of time. So how is it that people can get so much more out of their 24-hour day than others? And I began to get kind of fascinated by this. And I saw that there are people that really are good at leverage, right? They can get leverage with people. They can get leverage with software. They can get leverage with systems. And I started to think about, there was a guy that I called to get some tips on. I didn't even know where to go. And it was one of the most, at the time, I'd probably look through my contacts on my phone and was like, okay, this guy is the most successful guy that I have the personal phone number of. So I'm going to call him.
Scientific research, right?
Yeah, totally. I called and I said, I've got all these things and I'm wondering if I could talk to you. He's like, yeah, do you want to go have lunch? I'm like, yeah, when could you make it work? And he's like, well, how about right now? And I thought, how the hell could he just go to lunch right now? That was the first thing that just totally blew my mind. I was like, really? Today? He's like, yeah, I mean, it's a little early, but I could meet you there in 15, 20 minutes.
You probably went, yes, I'm getting my problem solved, right? And yet it also opens something in your mind going, how is this possible? How does this work?
Exactly. I was both excited and totally perplexed and blown away that he could just, I just called him out of the blue. I couldn't believe he picked up the phone, and I was super surprised that he just was going to go take me to lunch right then. So went and had lunch. And again, that was just kind of burning in my mind. But I realized that while we were at lunch, he called his office a time or two. He sent a couple of texts, and I'm like, he is getting leverage from people. He has other things going on. There's a lot to that. And that began that kind of opened the door in my mind to, I want that. A, B, how do I get it? And so the Freedom Flywheel is there's I think when somebody starts out with a business, there's this calling placed in our heart. Entrepreneurs, I believe, the starting point of all this is entrepreneurs are special. There's not a lot of people in the world that are crazy enough to get up out of bed and go like their life depends on it with no instructions, nobody telling them what to do, nobody hanging over their head. And so it's unique and it's special, but it also comes laden and packed with potential problems. And there's people that work at the same business for 3 years. It's fascinating. A lot of my clients have had within $50,000 to $100,000 of revenue for years. Like they just keep doing this. There's a floor and a ceiling, and it's a thermostat, I call it. Like the floor, or there's the bottom part of the thermostat where once it gets to that, things change and it starts to level up. Once they hit this other high point, the high water mark, things start to cool off and it goes down. And some of them have done it for a decade and still within a $50,000 margin of, comfort. So I've recognized that there's these personal human psychological traits that we all kind of experience. And it usually comes back to how we started. As a founder, you start and usually it's like you said, it's that founder syndrome, right? It's the more hustle. So we know that we start out, we need this much, we want to grow it to this much. So we work harder, we work more hours, we kind of choke things, like we control everything. We want to be a part of every single process. And what I call that level one, like 1.0. So in level one, more hustle equals more returns, more profits, potentially, hopefully, and we make a little more money. People want to go to level two, so they just think I'm going to do more of what I did in level one. And it's literally the opposite. Like that will make you go backwards. And that's why people start to come down because they work harder. They choke things. They try to control things. And then the culture of they hire somebody, but they don't know who to hire. They hire out of order. And then things they go down. Profit goes down. Revenues dip. So they're working on sales. Revenues go up. They're like, I'm going to hire over here. Their focus goes into delivery. Sales go down. And then they're just constantly chasing. I'm like, there's this cycle that keeps happening. And I need to create a cycle of improvement instead of a cycle of deterioration. And so that's where I've introduced the systems, the delegation, and the mindset that if you can go through this flywheel at each level, it provides an opportunity to kind of shift up every time you go through this. So there's an order and a sequence to delegating. And that's what a lot of us get wrong. We, as entrepreneurs, especially if you've been in business for 5 years or more, you probably fantasize about your operator, the one hire that's going to come in with one horn on their head and make everything magically better. So we spend our time unicorn hunting. We really do. And we think we need to find the right person and they're going to make it all right. Usually that person has a higher price tag. And so we hire somebody at a COO level. We hire somebody in sales because we might not be good at sales. And these are not where you start. You start with back office stuff because the entrepreneur, the founder, they need to develop some skills in level 2 as well. So if you jump right up into upper management, you hire in a C-suite level before you've even hired like a customer service rep or an executive assistant or somebody in the back office, you've got no skills to manage. So you truly are just hoping for the best.
Uh-huh.
You know, Steve, I've been thinking, if I could clone myself, I'd finally get through my inbox.
Yeah, that's true. Or you could just call Telltale Offshore, right? They basically do that, but better.
True. They match businesses with top-tier remote talent, customer service, admin, even SaaS development.
Yep, scale your team, cut your costs, and Kalina, keep your sanity.
And their people feel like part of your own team, just without the extra desks.
Yeah, exactly, right? Head to telltaleoffshore.com to get your new superstar team member onboarded in just a week. Thanks to Telltale Offshore for supporting the business game. I really like that. It's quite a different nuance. It's not the Freedom Flywheel is not a one and done thing. It's a continual iteration as you grow as a business owner, rather than, well, I've done the flywheel once, all my problems are solved. So life doesn't work out that way, does it?
Nope. No, it definitely does not. And as you go through those levels, there's different levels have different devils, and there's different challenges that you face. And so when you go from 1 to 2, your first set of challenges might be, how do I implement delegating practices? And again, this is why I think the delegation sequencing is one of the most important parts of that first 1 to 2 transition. You need to start with the right roles where there's maybe less on the line, if you will. You have a little bit higher margin of error that is allowable, and you kind of cut your teeth on, this is how I delegate something. And delegating, not just to get stuff off your list, but to get more of your time back and to get more bandwidth and throughput. And then there's this whole process of learning how to inspect what you're expecting of your subordinates. And that's a whole new thing that most founders, that you don't get taught that when you have an idea to start a business. This is all new stuff. So when you take a step back, Steve, I think as you're going through these levels and cycles, like you shift who you are. And if you look at some of the people that we admire and look up to in business, they're not down in the trenches they're not the hardest workers, but they've become effective communicators. They've become effective managers of human resources, and they've become very organized, right? And they've known more than anything how to bring smarter people than them to work right next to them.
Yeah. One of the key pillars of the Freedom Flywheel is the concept of mindset. And I just want to dive into that a little bit, because people, our listeners here, they're intelligent people. They're information seekers. So we've probably all heard our mindset to death. All of those things. That I'm interested in your take. Why do you start there, and what are the things that entrepreneurs, I guess, the different thinking they need to adopt, to really move up a level, as you say?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes mindset has this woo-woo kind of feeling to it, and I don't, honestly, I sometimes shy away from the word to begin with. I actually believe that it's the most important thing, and I'll explain why. But I often start with, people like brass tacks. They like logistics. They like 1 + 1 = 2. Give me something that is tangible, it's measurable, I can get the result quickly. So when I start working with people, I like to focus in on a quick win, and I usually hone in on their calendar and their time, because if I can give somebody 4, 5, 6, 7 hours back in a week, in their work week, they feel that. You can put a ruler on that and measure it, and it feels really good to have almost a whole workday back out of a chaotic schedule. Once I have that credibility, I like to go right into mindset. And the way I look at mindset is everything that you do, from this conversation that people are listening to now, to the colors that they see, to the pen they're holding in their hand, or the steering wheel, and whatever, it's all being processed in our mind. And you may have heard this saying, like, have you ever gone into the cupboard where maybe your wife says, "Steve, will you grab me the salt?" And you're you don't want to get the salt. You thought maybe she should have got the salt before she sat down, and you're a little bit pissed off about it. So you're kind of like, why do I got to get to this?
I plead the Fifth Amendment here, right?
Yeah, you don't have to answer this. This is all rhetorical, okay? But you go open the cupboard to get the salt, and you're like, we don't have any salt. The salt isn't here. I don't know where the salt is. And then your wife walks over and picks the salt up right in front of your face. And you're like, how did you not see that? Like, what's going on there?
Can we move on? This is uncomfortable. Yeah.
So everything is processed through our minds. And if we have an episode or an instance like that that's happened, and I think everybody can relate to that happening once with wives or children or whatever it is. And it's because we've determined in advance that we aren't going to get the salt. We've closed that part off. And therefore, our brain doesn't even process that. And it's not woo-woo or mystical, or it's just, it's reticular activating stuff. It's scientific neurologic stuff that's going on in our brain. So I think mindset is the most important place to start, because if there's a thing blocking you, let me give you a different example that just happened yesterday. Like, one of our clients is running a business that they brought in about $72,000 of net operating income this year to date. The year's almost over, right? They've also paid themselves around $110,000 this year in wages. So they're in a decent tax bracket. And now the year is coming to an end. They're working on their business daily, right? That's all that they're thinking about. They have another entity that's brought in about $20,000 of profit that is just kind of like a little holding company. So together they're at about 90 grand profit plus 100 something in W-2 wages, like just income. So they're going to have a tax situation. Now, they're working on their business is they're an eye doctor, right? They prescribe people glasses and all these things. Now, this to me is kind of a mindset issue, because I think about taxes when the leaves start changing colors and it gets fall outside. I know the end of the year is coming, and that's what I trigger to think about a tax. Not that I know anything about taxes. I'm not a CPA, but just looking at their books, if they make a couple of changes this year, it will go from them owing the tax authorities around $35,000 as it looks right now, plus all the money they've already had withheld from their paychecks, or they could make some strategic moves in the next 6 weeks before this calendar year changes. And now they could get upwards of a 20, like we looked at a couple deductions that they may be able to qualify for. Are they going to buy a new 6,000 pound car? Because in the US, you can accelerate your depreciation on vehicles up to $60,000 or $70,000. So all their income goes away if they buy a business vehicle before this year is over. And that, knowing that that's an opportunity, like that's a real measurable. So now we're having conversations with them that they can put a plan in place with their tax professional. And that's going to be the difference between paying $25,000, $30,000 in taxes in the spring. Instead, they'll get about a $20,000 tax refund. So we're talking about a swing of $50,000. Those are the kind of things, Steve, that I think are that's how you go up and burst through the ceiling, as opposed to hit the ceiling and come back down, because in March, now you're in a cash crunch because you just had to write the tax authorities a check for 30 grand.
And that is a mind shift, the way you interact with the system, right? And that's one of the things you're talking about with the Freedom Flywheel. How can we shift our mind, our thinking, to interact better with the system to our advantage? That's kind of where it starts, isn't it?
It is. That's exactly right. So again, usually as you start a business, and in their case, like this is a couple that runs this business and he's an eye doctor, like they're thinking about people's vision, they're seeing patients, they're taking care of the office, they're doing all these things. And it doesn't take we have these limiting beliefs where we think taxes are not really my strength. And therefore, if you say the word tax, I'm going to just kind of shut down and come back over here where I feel comfortable with prescriptions and eyeglasses and, all this other stuff. But that's just a belief. It's a belief that frankly doesn't hold water. I mean, it's just not true, because I can tell them that and they can say, oh, wait, I'm going to call my CPA. And now they're $50,000 of real money that all came because of a mindset shift. So that's going to make a big difference over the next year. It could be the difference between them growing much further, or it can also be the beginning of a demise of a business with that kind of losing that much cash out of their business.
Hey guys, quick pause to talk about Opus Clip. one of my favorite tools for creating content without the stress. If you've ever spent hours editing videos wishing there was an easier way, Opus Clip is your solution.
Their AI engine takes your raw clips and turns them into share-ready videos in under a minute. No editing skills required, no headaches, no endless hours at your computer.
Seriously, it's like having a professional editor in your pocket. You can create more content, experiment with formats, and share it instantly, all while saving a ton of time.
And if you want to get started with a great sign-up bonus while supporting the show, just use the link in the description.
All right, back to today's episode. We're about to drop more insights you won't want to miss.
Justin, you talk about a period in your life where you experience drift. And I'm curious about, I guess, two parts of that. Number one, what is drift? And is it possible to drift even though you are busy? As in you're stuck in that kind of, because I'm working so hard here. I'm not drifting. I'm working hard. I'm grinding. So that concept of drift, and is that a common trap for entrepreneurs?
Yes. I do think it's very common. And I do think if you feel incredibly busy, I would say you are really susceptible to drift. And so I'm kind of answering your questions backwards. And drift, I picked up that term after reading a book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. He's the one who wrote Think and Grow Rich. He's been dead for decades, but the book just was released in 2010 or 11 or 12. So it's kind of fascinating because he's been dead for so long. But in that book is where he talked about drifting, where a period of his life, he was kind of on the run. He was hiding out from some bad characters, and he felt this dark presence, and he didn't work on building anything. He was busy, he was nervous, he was doing stuff, but he wasn't really doing the thing that he felt called to do. And it really resonated with me because I kind of went through a similar process to a degree. It's bittersweet for me because I spent 12 years living in a very small town in the woods of Vermont. And during these years, I raised my kids. I drove them to school every single day. 12 years, I was there every day. And not very many dads get the opportunity to spend the kind of time that I did with my kids. So that part of it was fantastic, but there was also this, I wasn't really contributing or building things that I felt like I could, and I just kind of kept pushing that aside. And I would, in fact, try to stay very busy during, whether it was busy with the kids or usually when the kids were at school, I would try to stay busy with some projects or some companies that I had some equity in, but never, in hindsight, really never fully contributing or fully committing to do anything. It was kind of going through some motions. So with the benefit of hindsight, which is the only way we can really see clearly, I am recognizing it wasn't until I moved out of the woods and I moved back here to Utah, and I began to build again and realize just how far I had gone adrift. It was kind of shocking to me.
Yeah. All righty. Let's dive into the framework and how that might, I guess, get someone out of that drift phase or whatever phase entrepreneurs feel trapped in. What are the first, I guess, two measurable indicators that show whether a person is building their business for freedom or building a business that owns them and therefore they're drifting along?
One of the main indicators is how you feel. If you feel stuck, if you feel trapped, if you feel chained, if you feel like you can't leave, these are all very strong indicators that you're building a business that is ultimately going to be a prison. The bad thing about that is you may even make money, and that will appease and buy some time for you. But that business is never going to really have the kind of value that's possible because you can't sell a business for very much that is dependent so much upon the founder that the founder can't leave the business for a weekend or for a week or 2 or 3 or 5. So that, I would say the first place to look is at your calendar and your schedule. And then the next place to look is the number of times you get phone calls and text messages coming in. And this is a trap. It's a tricky thing because there's a part of us And maybe there's a part of us that feels that's an importance, like our ego feels good to answer questions, So that's this draw, like it's easy to answer the questions. We feel self-important about it. But at the end of the day, we bitch about always needing to be the one to answer the question. So when you feel that it's a bit of a conundrum, right? Like you want some peace and some space, but yet you just have to be the one to answer every question. And if you're saying things like, I just can't find good people, or there's never enough time, I would say, do you have a competitor? And almost always the answer is yes. and then, does your competitor have good people? Almost always the answer is yes there. So what gives? That's kind of a litmus test that I talk about with people that are wondering, like, I don't know, I just can't break out of this. I just, those kind of put things in perspective. Like, wait, how does my competitor take 3 weeks off every 2 months? Or how do they have people that show up and they don't have to micromanage them? How do they? So if that's happening out there, it can certainly happen in here, but there may need to be some things that need to change, some blocks we got to remove.
Yeah. Yeah. When you first start working with the founders, is there a lack of clarity about what they really want? Or do all of them come in and say, no, I definitely want X, Y, Z, and that's a really strong pattern with your clients? Or is it a case of, gee, I don't know? How does that work?
Yeah. It's very much, I would say they think they know what they want. And then I ask them and they say more, better, faster, less. I'm like, okay, we don't know if we're going to win at any of those because none of those things are actually linear or binary or measurable. So when you press it, most people realize, well, I guess I don't really know at all what I want. And so, yes, getting clear is a very big first step.
Yeah. And are there any tips or tricks to doing that? I know it's a very personal and individual thing, but how do you guide someone through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually do. I think there's a process. I have a process that I go through every year. My wife and I go on a little trip and we just clarify where we're at and where we want to be. I think the short answer to your question, Steve, is I start with a 20-year picture. It's always been hard for me to think about what I want in the next year. And I've heard it said that humans will drastically overestimate what they can do in a year. They always just overshoot the mark, right? But they will also underestimate what they can do in 5 or 10. And so that we have this, there's this cognitive dissonance between what we think we can do, what we ultimately are capable of, and we just lack the understanding, it seems, of compounding consistency. If we could just do something every day. So my strategy for this that I use in my life, I've been using it for years and years, and I put it in place with all of my clients too, is I start looking at a 20-year picture because our brain tends to let go of the how when we talk about 20 years. If we talk about a year, it's like, if I ask you any of your goals right now, you are almost 99 out of 100 times, you're going to default to well, how am I going to do that? That's our brains like that closure, that logic. But when we talk about 20, you're like, it's a little bit loosey-goosey. And so our brains can let go and dream a little and have a little permission to just be silly, to have some fun. But then we work backwards from that 20 and into 10, 5, 3, and things start to become a little clearer. And we can see a pattern start to emerge. And then we can get clear about what's important to us. And when we bring it all the way back to a year, that's when we get rid of the goals and the I hope and I wish, and we turn it into standards. For example, I wanted to get one of mine this year after a few years of my boys kind of jabbing at me was to get in shape. So at the beginning of this year, my in shape goal turned into the standard of 2,100 calories a day, measure every single gram of food that I eat, and always get 220 grams of protein every day. That was the standard. Now, so I made some assumptions. I did a little research. I talked to some trainers. And if I hit those 3 things every single day and worked out every single day, there's really, really good evidence that I was going to be in a lot better shape within a year. So that's my standard. And I did that for 3 months. I've dropped a bunch of pounds, a bunch of body fat percentage. I've been in the best shape ever. because I turned it into an actual standard that I could live by on a daily basis, not well, I hope I'm going to lose some weight this year and maybe I'll tone things up this year. And, that's not measurable. I want to be better. I want to be more fit. Like you can't, if you don't know what winning is and you can't define it, then you also don't know what losing is. Or if you just want to lose weight and that's your goal, then you lose a half a pound and your brain's like, okay, we're done. Cheesecake, let's go. And you can justify all those things where you set a standard and just commit to it for 100 days. Then you can measure in 100 days where you're at.
It's an interesting phrase, the standards, setting standards. And I guess, gee whiz, to be provocative, do founders need to have more standards or clearer standards to live by even? Interesting question, right?
It is. Yeah. I think many of them could definitely do well. And a lot of us, I put myself in this camp, that's why I say us, we are masters at complication. We make things complicated. We add complexity where it doesn't need to be. Because, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, if we can distract ourselves with busyness, then that drifting can take place and we don't have to. Steve, there was a time in my life where I had a wall built up on this side, and everything on this side of the wall was the finances, the numbers, the spreadsheets, the taxes. And I just kept building over here because I was good at building. I was building relationships. I was building revenue. I was adding new accounts. I was adding clients. I'd go out and land this new one that would bring in $1 million a month for the next foreseeable future. And I just kept building this wall higher. And I stayed so busy over here, I turned it into a $100 million company that was stolen from me. All the money was gone after years of building because I didn't want to look at the numbers and I just left anybody from the outside could have probably spotted that in a second and just said, problem. But yes, that lack of clarity, that lack of standards, I didn't have a standard with that. My standard was avoided at all cost. That was truly the standard. And it cost everything.
That's a tough lesson.
It's an expensive one, that's for sure.
Actually, interestingly, just on that, I did notice where you reflected earlier in your life, you had a reason why a whole lot of things didn't work. There were blames outside of you. What changed that for you and why was that important?
I knew that I've had that entrepreneur streak, right? That spirit. And I knew I wanted to do something on my own, but I never executed. I never had the courage to actually go all in. And so I would try things. I'd have side hustles, but I always tried to keep my 9 to 5. I'd keep a job so I could say I could have an income. And then I got married and then I had a baby. And so I felt like now I'm obliged to have this income. Like I have to take care of things. It's a requirement. So I had that pressure, quote unquote, to provide. And then everything I tried, I never really staked it all on me. It was always, I've come up with this idea. Let me bring 2 or 3 other people in and things would start to go. Then they would lose interest or they wouldn't follow through with their side of it. And I think it really just came back to, I never really bet on me all the way. I think it came down to courage, honestly. It came down to gut. And when I did, it wasn't easy. I mean, I spent the first 6-7 months of the business that I finally went all in on just me. The first 7 months or so, I lived on my mother's living room floor with my wife and 2 children. Like we had nothing.
That's humbling.
It was not pleasant.
Yeah, it's humbling.
It really is. Yeah. Especially when your wife will kill you and you're not doing anything to provide anything. Like, man, it was bad. But it really was. But it was the weight that I carried then gave me the muscles I needed in the next phase. It was that there's nobody to blame. So you mentioned it in the question about how I began to develop these systems. It wasn't because I came up with this, I'm not super smart or just exceptionally talented. I just didn't see any other way, and it was the same thing back then living on my mom's floor. in order for me to win, there needed to be no other way. Because when there was another way and I always had a scapegoat, then I'd blame them and it didn't work. The same thing when I actually started to do really well and I found mentors to show me the way that I didn't understand. I tried everything on my own, but I had to sleep more than 4 hours in a day on average. So I just didn't know what else to do. It's a forcing function, I guess.
Controversial question. What do you think's the biggest lie that founders tell themselves?
That they're the smartest person in the room, that they have the answers. My whole world shifted when I changed that perspective. Like I mean, I went from being proud of myself of bringing in a couple $100,000 a year to literally inside of 12 months bringing in $2, $3, $4, $5 million of profit a month. When I started to recognize the compounding that I could get, that I could do my thing. And that I could learn, I focus more on me becoming a better version of me and learning things that I could stay in my lane, if you will, right? I did the things that I did the very best at that were harder to delegate because nobody cared about things like I did. I can hire that out. So I did what I could do and I maintained those client relationships and I landed new deals. But then I brought in people in coding and in software development and in operations that far outpaced me and my abilities. Far. I mean, 2 master's degrees and I just barely finished high school. I mean, they made me look really dumb and I began to revel in that. And that was one of the biggest things that turned around that I think I see again and again and again is founders think they've got to have the answers and it's got to be up to them. And they don't.
Yeah. I love that. What's one of your favorite client success stories?
Good question. I love them. I love the one I just mentioned to you about the taxes, right? I mean, it lights me up that somebody gets a $50,000 change because of a 15-minute phone call. I mean, that is a great ROI. But probably one of my favorites is there was a woman that was working similar, like I really could relate to her because she was working the kind of hours that I was working. She had a team of maybe 7 people at the time, if I remember right. And she would go into the office on Saturday to clean the office and to take out the garbages. And she was trying to do some of the bookkeeping and billing on Sunday. And I was like, man, that's me. That's what I did in those early years. She had a tough time even making payroll often, but was bringing in around $20,000 a month usually. But the money, bad collection process, but she was doing the job of all these people. And we started, like there was this crystallizing moment when she figured out what her time was worth. And I asked her, what do you think your time's worth? She's like, I don't even know how to know that. What do I get paid? Or she was only paying herself about $50,000 or $60,000 a year at the time. So I said, no, let's look at your top line revenue. And then let's pull out all the cost of goods sold. So let's look at gross margin and divide that by the number of hours that you have in a year, which is 2,080. And let's come up with your time. And we saw that was around $400 an hour. And she went, wait, do that math again. And so I walked her through it one more time. She's like, you're telling me that I make $400 an hour? I'm like, that's straight out of your books. I mean, that's real numbers. It's not an opinion. And then I said, so how do you think that pencils out when you spent 3 hours yesterday cleaning the office or Saturday cleaning the office? Do you think that, and she lived in LA. And I said, do you think that somebody in LA you could find for maybe $25 an hour that could come in and clean the office just as good as you? And you could just see it wash over her. Like her mindset changed. She began to become a little bit disgruntled about things that were below her pay grade. And she transformed her business. Within 9 months, she sold for millions of dollars. She exited her business. She went from just struggling and like scraping and borrowing money to make payroll to she immediately fired 2 people. The other people started to rise up really quickly. She had a cleaner come in and clean the office. She never did that ever again after that conversation. And then within 9-10 months, she exited for multiple millions of dollars and stayed on with the acquiring company for about $500,000 a year in salary plus stock. I mean, and now she travels the world and invests in real estate and just like lives her perfect version of reality.
Well,
and I love that.
That's a great story. And it's interesting. It loops back around to that identity / mindset shift that we started speaking about earlier on. And that's a real life example of that, right?
It really is. It really is. And that's something that, I don't know if anybody is resonating with that and they're wondering, like, what is my time worth? I have a Freedom workbook, kind of just like it's a Google Doc that I give my clients, the starting point. And if anybody listening is like, I wonder if I'm drifting or I wonder what my time's worth, just come find me on Instagram at It's Justin Lund and just DM me the word business game playbook and I'll send it to you. Like, it's my gift to you. It's just a Google Doc. It's not fancy, but it gets the job done. And if you need some of those mindset shifts, it may give you some insight into where some of your time is going that could be maybe below your pay grade and maybe begin to unlock some of those things, because it is, whether it's a 15-minute call about your taxes or a 15-minute call about your hourly rate, one unlock, one shift sometimes can mean millions of dollars.
Fantastic. Justin, as we begin to wrap up, and thanks so much for sharing your expertise, I've just got a couple of little things to finish. Firstly, you mentioned the word business game. So if business truly is a game, what's your definition of winning?
Freedom. Like I think winning is just being able to do what you want, where you want to do it, with whom you want to do it, to have the time and the flexibility to just decide. And it doesn't, with that, you don't need to sacrifice profits, revenue. Like that's really winning to me.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. One of the things we do like to do with our guests is just to delve a little bit deeper behind the person behind the screen and get to know you a little bit more. We have the rapid fire round, and that's 10 quick questions that we want you really not to think about, just instinctively answer really quickly in one or two words. So I'm going to fire them at you really quickly. You ready to go?
Let's go.
All righty, here we go. What was your first job?
I was a cook, catering company.
Okay. What's your coffee order?
I've been I don't drink coffee much anymore. I used to just be black. And then I've been getting into more with working out. I've been doing pre-workout stuff. So no coffee. I do the pre-workout to get a little bit hyped up on caffeine.
Android or iPhone?
iPhone.
Mm-hmm. Office or work from home?
Both. Depends on the work I'm doing. And it depends on what my family's up to.
Yeah. Early riser or night owl?
Early. It used to be the other way around. I've shifted in the last 5 years or so.
Okay. All right. One piece of tech you couldn't live without?
iPhone. Same.
Okay. Your current go-to productivity hack?
Okay. Focus on one thing. Write it down in the morning. The one thing that you need to do today to move closer to the life that you have imagined for yourself. One. Just one. Don't do two. Just one.
Wow. Best investment you've ever made, either money or time-wise?
Investing in myself.
Mm-hmm. The last but not least, if you weren't doing what you do now, what career would you choose?
I've always liked doing sales. Sales gives me an opportunity to interact with people, and it keeps me tuned into psychology. And I love that. I love figuring out the way brains work and why we do the crazy shit we do sometimes.
All right, fantastic. We will start to wrap up there, Justin. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and the stories from the trenches that really make a big difference. So if listeners want to find out more about you and Propel, where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can visit our website, propelyour.com. Best place is probably on socials, because that's where we're spending a lot of time. We have a goal that I've kind of put forth to reach 50,000 business owners. I want to try to use some of my experience from the trenches in the past to save you time, money, energy, give you a little more freedom. So the only way that I know we can reach that many people, 50,000 business owners, is through content. So look for us on Instagram at It's Justin Lund. Same handle on Facebook, on TikTok, I'm on LinkedIn, YouTube. Like, we're all over there. So.
All right, fantastic.
And I'm in the DMs too. If anybody has any questions that I could help with, I'm happy to jump in and do what I can.
Fantastic. Justin, thank you so much for your time. That's all we do have time for, folks. So wherever you're listening from, thanks for joining us here on The Business Game, and we'll see you next time. All right, that's a wrap for today's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.
For more insights, strategies, and stories to help move the needle on your business, we'll meet you back here on Thursday.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business Game.
If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay connected.
A big thank you to our major sponsor, Tyler Offshore, for powering today's episode.
And join us again on the next episode of The Business Game,
A podcast that moves the needle.